Hello and welcome to Joko Yo. Over on the Johnston-Nash line at the very northern tip of Johnston County near the community of Emmet, that if you don't know how it's pronounced, it's kind of like Calibit. If you read it, it's called Challybeat, but it's Calibit. Well, the town of Emmet, or community of Emmet, is spelled like emit, like you emit some, radiation or something, but it's Emmet. Anyway, so just on the Johnston-Nash line, there is a hill, and it's near the Buckhorn Reservoir, just a couple miles to the left. If you don't know where that is, just look at Google Maps. Well, this little place was called a freak of nature once by naturalist Dr. B.W. Wells on a visit in the 1930s. He was a botany professor at NC State. It was State College at the time. Anyway, it's called Flower Hill, and it's part of the, if you're a geologist, you'll know what I mean, but it's part of the Raleigh terrain, which was kind of cool, that's what this entire podcast episode's about. Well, like I said, it's on the Johnston-Nash line, and it's what geologists call a disjunct mountain community. And yes, I said mountain, because at one point, Flower Hill was once part of a large chain of volcanic islands. I mean, Dr. Wells thought it was part of the ancient Ocoee mountain range, and again, I'll get to you in a few minutes, but just how ancient it is. But it's a disjunct mountain community, a micro environment, if you will, that survived the retreat of the last ice age 10,000 years ago, leaving a cooler, sheltering environment friendly to things like Catawba rhododendrons and galax, wildflowers and mosses, and lots of other vegetation that it's not, well, the only other place you see it close by is about 200 to 300 miles to the west, where it's cooler. You also find these rhododendrons and galax and the particular kinds of wildflowers and mosses in Canada. The Smithfield Herald, back in 1937, picked up the story of Dr. B.W. Wells' visit. Like I said, he was a professor at NC State, a botany professor, and the Herald picked up the story, reported it, and suddenly Flower Hill was famous. On May 4th, 1937, the site recorded more than 4,760 visitors, some from New England even. And they came again the next year to see this freak of nature, as Dr. Wells called it. Wells believed the area to be a remnant of, like I said earlier, the ancient Ocoee mountain range, older than the Appalachians, even older than the Uwaris, which are way older than the Appalachians. To give a perspective, the Appalachian mountain range was pushed up from the Earth's crust roughly 480 million years ago. That's before any dinosaurs ever existed. Let that sink in for a second. This is the Appalachians. In fact, the Appalachians formed before any animals larger than millipedes even existed on land. Meaning that when the Appalachians were formed, the only animals in the world were in the ocean or beside it, and none of them were even dinosaurs yet. There were plants on land, but we wouldn't recognize hardly any of them. That's when the Appalachians were formed. Crazy. So the Uwharrie Mountains, which they're in the North Carolina Piedmont, stretching up into Southern Virginia. Well, they're older than the Appalachians. Now, if you don't know where they are, open up a map app like Apple Maps or Google Maps and find the North Carolina town of Troy, or even Mara Mountain State Park, or Lake Tillery, Baden Lake even, and you found the Uwharrie. They were once a chain of mountains reaching 20,000 feet high. To give you a perspective, the Mount Everest, the tallest mountain in the world, is significantly smaller than that. See, the Yawaris were also pushed into other land, like the Appalachians later. Again, for perspective, when the Yawari were formed before the Appalachians, there was not yet any animals like anywhere, not just on land, anywhere, except for things like arthropods, crustaceans, maybe some jellyfish-like things, some worms maybe, some fungi, microscopic organisms, but that's it. That's old. That's insane. And in the Yawari, well, they were formed 500 million years ago. This is again before the Appalachians. Flower Hill, just south of the community of Emmet near the Buckhorn Reservoir in northern Johnston County, is believed to be even older. Part of a chain of volcanic mountains that erupted for millions of years, exposing rock, dispersing rock, ash minerals across central North Carolina, which were then underwater. When this range, which Flower Hill may be part of, was erupting, animals had just evolved of any type, anywhere, and the only kinds that existed were microscopic, meaning that we could not even see those animals without a microscope, much less recognize. That blows my mind. I don't know if that's even able to sink in. It's hard for me to sink it in. This range was very high and so old, and so much has happened over 700 million years since Flower Hill was, formed, that the rocks that made up this range have been pushed, pulled, smashed, whipped by the wind, washed by water, frozen by ice multiple times. That is not at all what it looked like then. Age does that to all of us, I guess. But since it was so high, the elevation of the range, including Flower Hill, is higher than the surrounding area. Y'all, Flower Hill has seen a global ice age, the creation of the ozone level, birth of multicellular organisms. Like, that is insane. It has seen the birth of fish, sharks, flies, insects, frogs, dinosaurs, pine trees, snakes, bees, mammals, birds, bears, grass, deer, possums, human, Pepsi Cola. And Flower Hill's been there for the birth of all of those things. Like, they did not exist whenever Mount Flower Hill was formed. And it also saw 4 more ice ages interspersed throughout that time, some of which pushed ice deep into modern-day North Carolina. It's even older than the Atlantic Ocean. Like, the Atlantic Ocean did not exist when Flower Hill was formed. So ice formed here, Flower Hill, and North Carolina, lasted a few thousand years, then melted slowly, very slowly. And as you could imagine, the forming and melting and reforming and melting and remelting and reforming of ice is enough to wear anything down, including 700 million year old rock. And where there's ice, there's cold, obviously, and creatures big and small will appear adapted to the climate. So yes, we likely could have had woolly mammoths here in Johnston. I mean, shark fossils and dinosaur fossils have been found here. And as the ice melted, it got warmer, and again, to quote Dr. Malcolm in Jurassic Park, well, life finds a way. So for a while, Flower Hill, just south of Emmet, had plants and animals similar, if not identical to, those in the North Carolina mountains and Canada, and everywhere in Johnston did, and all of central North Carolina did. But as the ice melted, Things that were used to the cold disappeared with it, except in places where it stayed cool enough for it, and that means mountains. The higher, the colder after all. And some places were high enough, isolated enough, and subsequently cool enough that some plants were able to survive, while in the areas around, in lower areas, more normal elevated areas, they died out as the climate got warmer. Which is why in Flower Hill, you'll find plants like rhododendron and galax and some ferns that exist at higher elevations, 200 miles or so to the west, and in Canada, that were there during the last ice age. They were all over central North Carolina, died out, but stayed there in Flower Hill, where it didn't have to suffer the climate warming that was happening, the effects of climate warming that was happening all around, but not in Flower Hill, not to the same degree, where it remained cool enough to stay. People have been visiting and hiking along that hill for years, and today is protected as a nature preserve where people are free to hike and spend some time checking out some remnants of the last ice age through chestnut oaks, hickories, beeches, maples, and rhododendrons, forming a landscape that is completely out of place. In the words of former JCC environmental biology teacher John Stevenson, they can visit a freak of nature, super freak, if you will. And thanks for listening. Until next time, y'all be good.